Welcome to Penetrate Radio. I'm Lucy Baldwin, and today I have Danny Granroli with me and Christina Morassi. And Christina is a really special guest. She, like the author of Existential Kink and Brenda Fredericks, who was on a few weeks ago, was also part of the One Taste community. And I'm going to let Danny introduce her because Danny actually has done work with Christina and came to me and was like, we have to have this woman. She's so amazing. So I'm really excited to meet Christina today. I'm excited to introduce her to you, and I'm excited to let Danny tell us about why you love Christina's work so much.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm just going to share my personal experience with Christina, and then I'm going to hand it over to you, Christina, and you can fill in and use your words and describe for us how you understand the work that you do.
Sure.
But Christina lives closest to me over I think you're in Western Mass. I'm in Southern Vermont. And I first discovered Christina through an amazing class that you did about embodying your inner Dom, I think it was called. And it was just this concept of energetically coming in and somatically coming into your sense and your place of power. And that was really beautiful and profound. And right after that, I discovered that you were teaching something that you call Sexy Shadow Cabaret. And that month was using the book Existential Kink as the foundation, as the principle. And I was like, oh my God, what are the odds? This is absolute synchronicity. I need to come to this class. And so I guess in short version, I will say what I discovered that Christina does in those classes is has a way of helping people cultivate a sense of erotic eros in their bodies, and then use that as a way to, through creative movement, you could say dance, but it's really like erotic creative movement,
Mm.
to embody and somatize. Is that even a word? You use the somatics of your body to engage with certain aspects of the shadow. And I just was like, everyone needs this because it is sexy, it is playful, it is creative. It's really, really exciting, beautiful work that I really love. So I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I love it. Okay, so do you want me to give a little more of a backstory of where I come from? Because we were like, let's let the bio go. Let's let this be real, and flow in real time. So where to begin? So I am deeply passionate about power and purpose. Ostensibly, I'm really like a purpose and business coach, but it's been interesting since I've been in Western Mass. I'm originally from this area, but then I've lived all over the world in California and been nomadic many times and lived lots of different places. But I'm back ostensibly in my hometown in a way, about a half hour away in Western Mass. And it's been very interesting that the area is asking me to teach a lot more Eros events like Inner Dom and a Kink Puja and the Sexy Shadow Cabaret. And it's been delightful. And it's really like a one aspect of my larger body of work, but that's what's being asked for. So I'm following the flow and really enjoying it because I certainly do love Eros. To me, I like thinking of it as a life force, and it is a power. So if I want to help people with their purpose, I really believe that we all need to be in our Eros so that we can use that to hopefully lead the movements that we're here to lead. And so just a quick backstory, I was out in Los Angeles in the healing arts as a total hippie healer for 10 years, doing body work and shamanic work and cranial sacral and polarity therapy. And then I crossed over into the coaching worlds and ended up building a business very quickly and really helping people find what I call their ecstatic brand of how to bring all of their gifts together in order to create a career that doesn't exist yet and stand out in the marketplace. Because if you bring all parts of you to your business, you won't be like anyone else out there on the planet. And so in that aspect of my life, I really created the dream of a successful coaching business where I was doing 3-day live events at the W Hotel in Hollywood and had high-end masterminds, and people would fly in from around the world. And it was exciting because it felt like I was in my mission and reaching people around the world. But I was still the hippie healer, and I had always promised myself I was going to learn the rules, and then I was going to smash them to smithereens. And so there was a moment where I felt like, okay, something isn't feeling in alignment with my soul anymore after about 4 or 5 years in the industry. And I was like, something needs to change. And so I started to try and offer different programs, or I had this machine of a successful coaching business. And so I was trying to turn the ship slowly of like, okay, how do I make this feel better? But it wasn't working. And so I had a like come to Jesus moment one weekend where I was like, there's a lot of these puzzle pieces that aren't quite working. I think I need to do something more drastic. And so I ended up pulling the plug on that business. And I thought I would go into the unknown for like a couple of months. But it's about to be the 12-year anniversary of me pulling the plug. And so it's been this interesting journey since then that I could talk about for hours. But the gist of it is that I'm very deeply connected to like, how do I live from my soul? How do I do business from my soul and be like fully expressed in everything I came here to do? And I'm not willing to do business until I know how to do that in alignment with my soul. And what that's meant is often I'm not doing much business. I've been more in my cave doing a lot of internal work and peeking my head out and doing like programs here and there, but not having stepped out to create a successful business again until I know that I like know how to do it differently. So it's been like an ego dismantling every which way from Sunday in that these last 12 years. And then along the way, that's when I found the orgasmic meditation world. And I took their coaching program back in 2015 because I was like, there's magic behind this body of work and I want to understand it more. And the organization, unfortunately, is problematic. There is no doubt about that. However, the practice itself is stunning and there is something beautiful there. And having studied energy work in like polarity therapy and how it moved, I was like, wait, what's going on with Eros here? And what's happening with this practice? And so through that course of action, I ended up creating this whole body of work that at the time was called the feminine operating system of like, I had a friend call it like a PhD in vagina of, like the owners and manual operator of like, how do we understand this power? And, these days I prefer that it's for all genders. And it's really, I think the closest, I don't quite know how to describe it in all honesty, but I would call it maybe decoding the mysteries of creation through like all of the things that I've studied. And so along that way, I've been teaching about the dark feminine for the last 10 years. And so, and also just like teaching about death power and all these things in the dark that I'm like incredibly passionate about because I really believe that most of our power is in the dark and no one teaches us how to go there. Carolyn does, which is great, and Existential Kink and that body of work, but most of us don't know how to go there. And so I'm very passionate because again, I want the power and purpose for us all. And I believe that darkness is one aspect of doing that. And so that's part of what we were working with in Sexy Shadow Cabaret. So that's a little gist of like my backstory.
I'm so curious, Christina, what do you mean when you say dark feminine? Like, what does that mean to you?
I love that. Okay. So here's how I describe it. For me, like the darkness, I do see it as feminine because if you think of Chinese cosmology in the yin yang symbol, the dark side of the symbol is what they often call the yin and often call the feminine. And so the feminine is inherently dark. Now, I think all of us have darkness inside us. And of course, when we're talking about the masculine and feminine archetypal energies, these are like energies of the universe. They are not about gender at all. We could just as well say protons and, electrons. We could say like left brain and right brain. We could say day and night, yin and yang, right? So when I talk about the dark feminine, to me, we're talking about like the deepest yin. And the way this shows up in the world is we could say the womb is dark. The moon is dark. Like compost, the rich, fertile soil of compost is dark. And these are all aspects of life that make life work. I mean, if we only had day and never had night, the world wouldn't work. If we only had like production and moving things out into the world without some rest, the world wouldn't work. And so darkness for me it's like dark is obviously has a connotation in our society, but it doesn't need to be. Because I studied something called polarity therapy, I learned about like, if you think of a battery, right? Like a battery has one end that is a positive pole and one end that is a negative pole. A negative doesn't need to mean bad. It's literally like electrons, right? But Power comes from having access to both ends of the spectrum that creates an arc of electricity between the positive pole and the negative pole. That's where power comes from. So for me, having been in the coaching industry for the last 16, 17 years and heard so much talk about manifestation, that definitely makes my eyes roll a little bit, unfortunately, because I think it's missing so many pieces of the puzzle. Because often they'll say, like, you need to focus on the light, you need to think good thoughts. But if you come back to my analogy of a battery, that's like having a battery that only has a positive pole. And that means you literally have no power. So for me, I'm talking about like embracing the full spectrum of life and learning how to love all of it, because that's when we get free and that's when we have access to all of our power.
I love that so, so much. And that feels so clear to me. And I'm wondering also, just for people who are listening and everything you're saying is so in line with everything that we kind of talk about on this podcast. And I think it is interesting how there is such like a mirror in these philosophies of coming from different angles. But I want you to tell me about Eros, like
Mm,
specifically how it is related to like sexuality. Like how is it
mm.
different from, but also related to sexuality?
Oh, I love that question because that's been coming up a lot in my workshops because I'm often saying I'm fascinated and more passionate about exploring Eros outside of sexuality. And so then often people ask the question, well, what do you mean and what are all the differences? So my favorite definition that I've seen of Eros comes from a book called On Becoming an Alchemist. And she likens Eros to the energy in spring that just like is bursting out of the soil that creates life. And it's springtime here in the Northeast, and it was a long winter. So it feels wonderful to have access to that energy again. And everyone's in a good mood, and you just feel like you have access to more life force. That's a way that that person, the author of that book, describes Eros. And I really like that because I see it as just like life force that wants more life. And so I think that that's a pure energy that doesn't need to be connected to sexuality per se. And the spectrum I'm often looking at is I see Eros on one end of the spectrum, and then I would say sensuality comes next. And so the way I like to describe sensuality is like literally of the senses. How are we being present and embodied? How are we feeling? How are we kind of just enjoying the sensations of being in human form? And so that's what I would say where sensuality is, and pleasure can certainly come in there, but sensuality is not sexuality necessarily either, right? So that's in between section. And then for sexuality, there's a lot of ways I could say this, and it's a developing definition. And so in my mind, sexuality is often where the genitals come in, and often when there's a direction and a goal. Usually, in our traditional sexuality out there in the world, people are like, okay, it's like, what are we going to do to get to orgasm and climax? And so there's a direction, which is a little different than just allowing the life force of Eros to move through and being present, and a little different than like, let me just be here in the moment with my sensuality and my feelings. And then sexuality is sort of where there's a direction. So that's my working definition of the spectrum from Eros to sensuality to sexuality.
Makes total sense to me. Thank you so much for breaking that down for us. I
Mm.
love that. I'm also here in the Northeast. I'm in Connecticut, and it's a
Yes.
beautiful time of year.
Yes, Eros, life force. Like it's like crackling electricity that, we could call it turn on too, but like it's that place where we feel access to more electricity and aliveness, to me is what I would call Eros.
Yeah.
So, Christina, you've talked with me a little bit about, your origin and the connection with one taste. And Brenda touched on this in another podcast as well a little bit. And I'd really love to hear, I guess, how the origins of some of the concepts of one taste are similar to the EK perspective. And basically, you said that that has been a really beautiful foundation. You've seen different individuals take it in these really broad, beautiful ways. And so I'm curious about how you've seen others take it and for you to talk more about your specific direction. You have a little bit with the polarity and the embodied and that
Mm.
stuff, but if you'd like to flesh that a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's fascinating because we can all learn different traditions and lineages and practices, and then we all take them into our bodies a little bit differently. And of course, we all have a different history that we can apply to that whole practice. And so I think it is fun. I love seeing how this all works. So when I was in the orgasmic meditation world, I was fascinated too about like, where did this come from? And so I'm not going to say I'm the world's foremost expert on this, so forgive me if these isn't exactly right, but I'm pretty sure these facts are close to correct. So I believe what happened is in the 70s, it all originated in a community called Morehouse, Lafayette, which was out in California, and someone created the clitoral stroking practice, where it was a partnered practice where a woman's clitoris was stroked in a slow, methodical fashion with no other goal but to feel. It wasn't about reaching climax. There was no goal of any kind. It was really like a meditation, like mindfulness practice. And so Morehouse, then there was a lot of offshoots that came out of that Morehouse time. And so Nicole Daedone was one of the people who was part of Morehouse Lafayette at some point. And she took the stroking practice and decided she wanted to disseminate it through like the world, and realized it might be good if we package this in a way that has like really strong boundaries, so that if you do an OM in one city, it's the same as if you do it in another city, which there was a certain brilliance to that, of course. And so she created this clitoral stroking practice and turned it into orgasmic meditation. But I've heard of other traditions that have offshot out of that. There's something called the pleasure course in California that is an offshoot of Morehouse. I believe the book written by Steve Bodansky, which is called Massive Extended Orgasm, is also an offshoot of that. Mama Gina, if you're familiar of the Womanly School of Arts, like she is an offshoot of the Steve Bodansky world. And then, so it's just all these fascinating offshoots that I think are really interesting. So my foray into the world was through orgasmic meditation. And so when I was there, I'm a little bit of a mad scientist. Like I feel like I've been studying things for the last 25 years, and I'm always like taking bits and pieces and being like, okay, wait, now how does this all go together? And so when I got into the orgasmic meditation world, I was like, there's energy flowing. I like this Eros idea. This is different than just like chi or prana, right? And so, but what's really happening? And then how do we have access to this? And, you know, when I saw my first demo and witnessed how much power comes out of a woman's vulva, it literally blew my hair back. I mean, I was like, oh my God. This was during the time I found it right as I pulled the plug on my business, which is fascinating. So it was like this I dove into that world because I had time and space. And what I found was like, okay, there's a power here. And I'm coming out of the coaching world with all my friends and their 7-figure businesses who are all on the verge of adrenal fatigue and burnout. So we're missing something. If all that power is coming out of a woman's vulva, why aren't we tapping into that to use in our businesses? And then for anyone who's read the seminal book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, you know, there's a chapter 11 called Sex Transmutation. And this is now like 2015 we're talking, and nobody talked about chapter 11. Nobody. It was like, you know, these coaches would talk ad nauseum about Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich, but skip over chapter 11. And I was like, and then if you read chapter 11, it's not very clear. Like it really doesn't tell you how or what exactly, but there's something there. This book apparently was written in the 1930s. So someone was talking about the power in sex like back then, right? So I was like, I'm going to figure it out. How are we going to do this? And so the next iteration of my body of work was like, how do I show women how to tap into that power in their vulva to use for their missions? And so I was calling it Pleasure CEO at the time. So in that, coming through this orgasmic meditation world, there's beautiful practices that come from, I think, if you trace it all the way back to Morehouse. And one of them we were taught was how to get off on every stroke. And that is such a fascinating concept when you first hear it, because sometimes when you're doing the practice of orgasmic meditation, sometimes it doesn't feel good, or it doesn't, like it hurts, or maybe you feel a little aversion to the person you're doing it with. So there's times when it's not pure pleasure for sure. And we were taught, get off on that stroke too, which was the way that they phrased it, of course. And so that was a like practice that really kind of got, you know, like got in deep for me. And then also One Taste would talk about like getting into agreement with reality, like not resisting it, but learning how to be a yes to it. And so these are beautiful traditions that I think, I took and then applied to my background in polarity therapy and the healing arts, and then also in embodiment work, and was like, how do I use those to bring in play and bring in ritual and bring in like the body to that? And from my understanding, I've been on Carolyn's list for many years and I love her writing and what she shares. And I love the book Existential Kink. She took that same concept and added in her Hermeticism background, if I have that correctly, and turned it into Existential Kink, which is brilliant. And it's amazing that it has disseminated into the world and so many people are aware of it. And so that's why when I, was doing the Sexy Shadow Cabaret and so many people in our area have read the book. And I was like, okay, often when I tried to explain Sexy Shadow Cabaret to people, they'd be like, oh, like Existential Kink. And I would say, yes, ish, like the concepts, yes, we both come out of the same world and I'm giving it my own spin in the ways that I teach. And like my specialty is the body and play. And so that's the way that I've worked with it. So we were inspired by Existential Kink in that series. And I think it's really like, it's a powerful concept. And the last thing I'll share before I'll hand it over is being this mad scientist that's gathering from all these different places, I've seen this teaching in many places. So in polarity therapy, we were taught that, all like when you resist something, when you're a no to something, it literally stops energy from moving. It's almost like it winds into like a stuck place. But if you learn how to be present and witness and be with that thing, your attention and your presence brings some energy to the stuck place. And it can start to like energy is naturally intelligent when it can move. So because you're bringing some attention to it, it can start to unwind and find its way back to health. So that's similar to being in agreement, right? And getting off on what's true. And then I've done some work with Gay and Katie Hendricks, and they would also teach. I can't really do it justice, but they had a way of explaining like when you're a no to something, obviously things can't move. And if you can love a thing exactly as it is, that's when it will transform. So they had their own way of teaching that. And then when I was in the Mama Gina world and I got to do all of her work in 2016 and 2017, she had a practice that she called yesing. So she would have women like get connected to the thing that they don't like, that they're really struggling with, and just be like, yes, I'm so glad this thing is happening. Yes, I love that like my life is falling apart. And you could see like the change that could happen for a person. And so it's this beautiful, like universal truth and lesson, I think, that comes through so many different traditions. And Carolyn has done amazingly by turning it into Existential Kink and helping people to understand it more.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So another person that I'm thinking about as you're talking about this, is Byron Katie. And I know she's not
Yeah.
part of this lineage because she just had her own like crazy awakening
Yeah.
experience, but her whole philosophy is stop arguing with reality, right?
Yes.
Loving what
Loving what
is
is.
the
Yeah.
name of her book. And it's like
Right.
loving what is, not trying to, it's like should this be happening? Well, if it's happening, then it should be happening. And
Mhm.
she, as a genuinely just like fully enlightened person, is so fucking like just listening to her is such medicine and is so powerful. I think it's hard if you haven't. I think some people, I know that some people hear her and they're just like super triggered because it's a lot to take on.
Mhm.
If you're not already initiated in this way of thinking, I feel like people hear her and they're
Right.
like,
Listening
she sounds like a psycho.
Well, listening to her is also like a psychedelic trip. Like I listened to the book and there were moments that I felt like my concept of reality was literally in flux. So it
Mhm.
can be very intense. Yeah, she's like graduate level.
I mean, I had the same experience, Danny. Listening to her, I literally it shifted my consciousness. And it is like people say sometimes being in the presence of these people, like it literally raises your consciousness or shifts your consciousness. And I feel like that does happen with Byron Katie, but you have to be open and willing. Cause even when I first came across like the work of Byron Katie, her process, I hated it. I was like, I
Mm.
don't get it. This is stupid. I'm just just lying to my, you know what I mean? Like the turnarounds and stuff, I'm just bullshitting. It didn't
Mhm.
feel like I couldn't feel it, you know? If you're doing it up here, it doesn't work. You have to kind of like really allow it to integrate. But that's another person that I'm thinking about. And then I don't know, just something that you really like you were talking about how the no creates that constriction.
Mhm.
And something that Layla and I have discovered that we've been like talking about and teaching for a while now that I think is interesting about that is actually like because sometimes we do have no's, you know? And so we talk about and teach a lot about like getting off on your no. Just
Yeah.
like being in a yes to your no.
Yeah, I
Because
love that.
especially like where we are in society today, some of us really need that empowered no. You know,
Mhm.
it's like we're in a cultural place where we need to have the ability to like say no.
Mhm.
And but how do we do that in a way that like keeps the energy flowing, you know? And I do so anyways, I was just thinking about that as you were talking, like getting off on the no and just
Yeah.
allowing that to be the current of yes around the no, the truth that is a
Mhm.
no.
Well, let me just add to that because I don't think this universal truth is ever saying that we're not supposed to ever say no. But we all know that difference. Like resistance is a different type of no. There's like resistance is push against. There's energy that you're using to stop something. Whereas I think a clear no is just like simple, neutral, not using energy to resist something. So absolutely there's room for a no for sure. And I love that you're like learning how to get off on your no for so I just want to make sure that that's clear. We do need our no's because if a no is our truth, then we're saying yes to our truth, right? So it's really more about that, like not saying yes to everything in life, but saying yes to life as it is. I mean, even if we're going to say a no, it might be good to start with a yes to what's actually happening in real time, to get present with it, to then get your clarity if you are a yes or a no, right? So they all work together, I would say.
Yeah, and I think this is like actually a really important distinction and nuance because if something is already happening in the moment, it is. That is what is real. And
Hmm.
so there is no benefit at that point of being in resistance to it. But we can choose what we want to do moving forward and how we
Hmm.
want to like meet that moment. And so we can meet it. The resistance is like the arguing with reality, right? The resistance is like the pushing away the truth or being mad, you know, trying to control things that we have no control over and then setting ourselves up for frustration and
Hmm.
suffering when it
Right.
turns out that we can't control those things, but we can always control how we respond to the moment. Yeah, it is so interesting how it's different people have taken this. And my understanding is that the Morehouse, is that what it's called? It still
Yeah.
exists.
It might. I actually am not totally sure about that, but I know its leader is long deceased, is my understanding, but perhaps other people have continued it. I don't know that for sure.
I'm not really sure about it either. But I know that, One Taste, and Nicole Daedone has been publishing books and putting
Yes.
out, and they're having events now, so they
Hmm.
still exist, and
They do.
their teachings are very aligned, obviously, with, you know, everything that we talk about on this podcast.
Yeah, and I think because I'm so passionate about purpose, and I have often worked with people who may be trained in certain lineages and modalities and practices, and they often feel a little like limited or stuck, like they can't do their own version of it. They do it the way it was taught. And I personally am a big fan of like take it all apart and understand like what's underneath it and what you're passionate about, and then add in all of your own flavors and then make it yours because Carolyn is an incredible example of that. And it helped the work get out wider, which, like, this is a powerful universal truth that the world needs, I think, to get free. And so, thank you to Carolyn for, being the one who was out there in the world. I've been in my cave for various reasons. That's felt like the right place for me. But someday I will have my own books out in the world. It's not time yet. But I'm so grateful to Carolyn because it helps, I've been teaching about the dark feminine, but in a much smaller way. But then people are more open to it because other people are out there putting it into the world. So I wanted to just kind of be a lesson to people too of like, you can make this yours too, right? Like add in all of your other flavors and all of your other passions and see like what you add to the conversation, because play, I add like the body, and I haven't seen that out there in any of those other modalities or traditions that I've spoken about, right? So for me, the way I see it, we talked about how when we're no to something and it like winds in and it gets stuck, and it's like, okay, well, the first thing to do is to get present with it, right? Like get into agreement with it. And then that's going to start to bring some energy to allow it to unravel. But then if you play with this, like the thing that's stuck, and what I mean by that is like, you could do some improv. You could do some like turn it into a character. It's very silly, like goofy work. But what I found is it's incredibly strategic. Like it's my mad scientist bringing out the goof because I'm like, listen, that playful energy has a lot of life force to it and a lot of levity. And so that's going to get that to move even more. And then if you pour on the turn on top of it, it's just like shazam. It's like a whole different alchemy is possible. So that's what I bring to the table and what I've been playing with Sexy Shadow Cabaret, because it's the basis of that body of work was something I created 20 years ago, still as a hippie healer, because I was doing one-on-one work on a massage table as most healers do. And I was like, I'm learning and seeing like how powerful the expressive arts are. Like I found ecstatic dance and I was like, wow, that's so transformative. And then I found kind of what I might call like a performance art improv. And I was like, wow, that's so transformative. And I found this like method writing class and I was like, oh, the expressive arts are incredibly transformative. How do I weave this in instead of doing one work on a massage table? So I started creating these workshops where I brought in like deep excavations, but brought in play using their, polarity principles. And then like all this alchemy was happening. It was like communal performance art alchemy, if you will. And so then I let that go while I was the fancy pants business coach for a while. There were pieces of it that were always woven in, especially to my, live events or my retreats. But when I was back here in Western Mass, I was like, I want more improv. Like I miss it. Like I want to feel more fully expressed. And so it started, I called it ritual improv. But then as it was going, we did a few rounds of it. I was like, I want to go deeper. I want to go darker. And so it was Halloween last year and I was like, let's choose a shadow place that we're going to go into. And I'm just going to call it Sexy Shadow Cabaret. And it's similar to ritual improv, but we're adding in now the turn on and the darkness to what we were doing before. And so it's been really fun. Like, so for instance, that first one we did on Halloween, I invited everyone to go into a place where they felt like they were a victim. They could access some of their victimhood. And then I helped everyone get free and connected to their bodies and be able to find some sensual movement. And then we all did these like simple, nothing too crazy, but improv pieces. And we used the sentence stem. This is something I think maybe I got through the Mama Gina world of like, I love that, or it's so sexy that. And so like a quick little example was for me, I was looking at feeling like my needs weren't being met or not feeling supported by the universe. And so I just went into it of like, I love not having my needs met. Oh my God, it's so sexy to just be living on crumbs and be starving for what I want. And it was wild. Like it was so fun and like so freeing. And so like almost like naughty in a way to like love that so much and to do it in a sexy way and be witnessed in it, by the way. And what happened was I was house sitting at the time because I was not sure I wanted to be in this area. And within 3 days of talking about my victimhood around not feeling supported by the universe, through a course of events, I all of a sudden had a beautiful place to live. 3 days. Like, so that's what I'm passionate about is the alchemy, like how do we use all of these things to learn how to work with life to ideally become our own like creators of, reality of like, how can we bring in play? So like, as we keep doing Sexy Shadow Cabaret, like it feels I have access to using it in real time. Like I've used it with the man in my life when we hit a tricky spot. I'm like, Sexy Shadow Cabaret, we're both doing pieces and it shifts the energy completely. So this is part of like what I'm passionate about is like, how do we, and I know Existential Kink is very similar. You can use it in real time. And so I think for me, I'm a big fan of play. Like can't we just all have a little bit more fun with our shadow work? Like, that's like my offering unto the planet of like with shadow work. I love shadow work, but like I want to have fun and I want it to be creative and embodied. And so that's where I've been locating and sharing. So, but I love that all these people are passionate about the shadow and that you all are creating this beautiful community. And Carolyn is out there doing her work in the world. And I think all of us want to keep learning how to get free and to love our dark too.
Yeah, I love this so much for a multitude of reasons. Just based on what you just shared, I want to like. There's a couple things. One, I will say that for me, like my EK turn on is almost always like 98% of the times I've ever had a turn on from EK, it was laughter. Just
Fun.
like full body laughter,
Uh-huh.
bubbling laughter, just humor. Like I still think of situations I've EK'd and I wanna laugh because I've,
Mhm.
like, fully gotten to that place with those things, and so it's not and we're always telling people on this podcast, like, it's not necessarily the turn on is not necessarily going to be sexual or, in your genitals at all, and I think a lot of people, like, that's what they're seeking, and so then they can kind of
Mm.
miss the boat, and so I love the
The full
openness.
Mhm.
Yeah,
spectrum
and
of
I
what
feel
turn on
like
is.
there's such an openness in what you're doing that's just like you're just like letting yourself embody it and it's almost to me it sounds like parts work like you're just embodying that part
Mm.
and you're letting it express
Mhm.
and I love also the openness of it because something else I've been in this EK world for a really long time, coached like hundreds of people around EK, been on like hundreds of calls, like in the like different memberships and whatever across like so many courses and programs and everything where people struggle to get to the turn on. Like
Mm.
but how do I get to the turn on? They can't find it. They can't feel the turn on. Like they're not because you have to like roll over into it. But it's actually challenging because it's like we have this idea of like enlightenment. And when you're like seeking enlightenment, you can't get to enlightenment that way,
Yeah.
right? You can't get there by like chasing after it and like nailing you can't like pin it down that way. And so
Mhm.
there has to be kind of this surrender and opening into it that some people just really struggle to roll over into it, right?
Mhm.
And especially in the beginning, it seemed like in the first, like over time, somehow it seems like more and more people are able to access the turn on. Like I think that there's something in the collective consciousness, like where more people have access to it now or something because enough
Mm.
people have done it.
Mhm.
But for some people, it's really hard. There becomes this pressure of like, I'm not doing it right. There's something wrong with me. I don't
Mhm.
get I'm not good enough. Like people can go into those places. And so what I love about this practice is that it's like there's no like thing that has to happen to tell you that you got it. It's
Mm.
just it's open. You're just like
Mhm.
doing a thing. And so I think that this is actually real I don't know. I'm just really digging it. I'm really digging it and I'm excited about it and I'm excited to learn more about it and
Mm.
I'm so glad that you're and so for anybody who's watching if you're in our membership Dominion Christina is doing a call this month in doing this in Dominion. And so I'm really excited about that too. And if you're not in Dominion and you want to participate in this, you can join.
Please join us. I love that because I think I call it often like it's like energy medicine. When I come, like I was a healer, I was working with energy. So I'm now I've taken it all apart, like what I was trained in, and be like, okay, how do I do this energy medicine? So in the playing with the thing, you may not access like the perfect amount of turn on in that moment. But one of my teachers used to say to me, who taught me healing, he was like, the session begins once your client leaves the room, which I thought was a bold statement because like you're doing work in the room, but like it's a whole other thing when you take that rearranged system out into the world and it meets things, right? So that's sort of the way I see it is like, let's play with it. And I know that as I'm playing with it, something's happening and the energy inside me, even if it's a little stuck, is naturally intelligent. It can find its way back to health if I like give it a little juice to find its way. So the play is like an energy medicine that's doing that in the moment. And then I think we take it with us and it keeps unfolding in that time. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's fun
Mm.
Yeah,
to
it's
play
like you're
with.
loosening something up
Yes,
and kind of
exactly.
letting it out of its cage so that it can
Yes.
find its way home.
Yes, exactly it.
Christina, I love this because we talk about in shadow work, it's not, you can't be goal oriented in shadow work. Because if you're
Yes.
goal oriented in shadow work, then you're losing the entire concept of shadow work. And so I think that was one thing that I loved about going and doing stuff in person with you is, and you had so many different little techniques of getting into our body, of into play, of into some concept of what a turn on or eroticism or Eros really means in our bodies, that it was really just about the experience. So I love what you're saying. Like, if you were in the mystery, you're helping people feel into their body that erotic approval, pleasure, and play with the mystery. And then just that it allows them to stay in that place of not trying to have a focus, a direction of I'm doing this for this specific reason and desired outcome, and something shifts. And that's the beauty about shadow work is something shifts. Undoubtedly something shifts, but we never know what that shift is going to be like when we take it then out into the world. And from doing the 2 classes and seeing little shifts that were happening for me, and also not even little, there was one that was quite big, but also getting to go twice and seeing a handful of people who are coming back and hearing from them, even just a little bit. I know they had an online chat where I'm sure even more was revealed. But yeah, to hear the way things had just mysteriously, beautifully unfolded for them too, whereas the conscious mind has these concepts of this is what I want, and this is exactly how it should be. And I have this linear concept of how I get from A to B. And it's adorable how limited our concept of that is. Like our creativity to imagine the direction, the possibility is quite limited in the conscious. And the reason I love doing so much of this unconscious play is so much more creativity happens, like so many more options. So the world really expands in a way that you can't conceptualize.
Ooh, I love that. I want to just add to that for a second because it makes me think. So, at the end of the day, I'm all about power and purpose. And I'm also about like, how do we get access to the energy to flow? Like, just so that everyone has access to all of their power. So I'm always looking for where's the thing stuck? And then how do we get it to move again? And so I bring in a lot of play, and some of it's really silly and really goofy. And there's certain people that are like, maybe not into it. But what I'm doing is so strategic because we all have these facades and these like veneers that we've put on to look like a nice, normal, upstanding member of society, and or I'm cool as fuck, and like we have these identities, and those identities usually like stop up a lot of our power. So what I'm doing is trying to trick people out of their like veneers and their egos with the playfulness, because we do exercises where I'm like, be as ugly as you possibly can, and I walk us in like very gently, like it's not just diving people, putting people in the deep end, but I'm looking for ways to loosen up that like the gunk of our facade so that we're actually in like pure life force and creativity, because I think that's when we're all gonna feel better. But it takes a little doing, right? Like, so we have to we definitely got to get out of our heads and get down into our bodies, but we also sometimes need to trick ourselves, and the play is often what I'm doing with that.
That's beautiful. Thank you for pulling the curtain back on that for us.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think that is so important. And gosh, this is so like petty and stupid. But, I did like a lot of years of work in the ayahuasca world. And I remember having this like moment where I realized like, this is so embarrassing to say. But like I was in my 20s and I just had this moment where I realized like, I don't have to try to look as skinny as possible in every single moment. I can just sit here and like release my stomach and just
Yes.
let it hang, And
Yes.
I was fucking skinny. I had just had like 2 babies, so I was a little like bigger than I had been. And so, yeah, I felt like I was always trying to like suck in. And then I was just like, I don't have to do that ever again. And
Yes.
certainly not like every moment of the fucking day. And it was this big epiphany for me, but it's exactly like what you're saying is like, look as ugly as possible. Like literally fuck it. Just let it go. Just take off the mask.
There's another layer to that though that as you bring that up, it makes me think about. So I'm aging, right? Like I'm 55 and I really don't think much about my age at all, but I just like the last couple of months it's starting to hit a little more. But I'm very passionate. Like I know that if I access my turn on and my Eros, nothing is going to matter. Nothing. So, as a little backstory, I actually started out in New York City as a fashion photographer in my 20s. And then when I started out then when I let it go and I became the hippie healer in LA. And then when I first stepped into the coaching world, I was doing personal brand photography for people. So it was like transformational photography. I was bringing together my gifts of healing arts and photography. So I watched, I did lots of silly stuff to trick people out of like their veneer so I could get the good shot of their photos. And then they'd get these incredible like headshots that just had so much life force and vibrancy. And so what I saw over and over again in doing these photo shoots was that when I could get a woman into her turn on, the photos were amazing. No body shape mattered in the slightest. The clothing didn't matter in the slightest. Nothing mattered in the slightest but the turn on and the life force. And then I got to see that being in the Mama Gina world. She's very much about that too. And so I keep challenging myself. Like I'm personally deciding not to do anything, to alter my appearance as I age. I don't want to say for forever, but I don't think I will because I'm like, listen, if you're not feeling good about your face, Christina, get into some more goddamn turn on. Like that is your aging practice. And so I'm not able to do it all the time, but this is part of the same conversation of like, how can I be in agreement with as an aging woman in this society, but how can I find approval? How can I also love it? How can I find the turn on and celebrate it? And my size, my face, my wrinkles, my bags, whatever, none of that matters. And so I just think that all of these concepts have applications in real time. And that's where I'm very passionate is okay, I want to do all this work in workshops and such, but I want to weave this right into our lives in real time as well.
Dude, I feel you so much on this. So much. I've been having this really deep process around this also lately just in my life because I had more kids because I just keep having kids and I haven't lost my baby weight from my last baby that I had, which to me is slower than usual on the weight, losing the weight. And so I was feeling a little self-conscious about my weight. And I was out, I know this intellectually, but I was out walking and I started listening to some music that was really turning me on. And, I was walking around just in my neighborhood, but I felt myself go from this place of covering myself up to just yes, I'm turned on and feel the sexiest I have ever felt in my entire fucking life and just really tapping into that and I could feel the power there and it was literally I was just I am hotter now than I have ever been at any weight and it's all about the turn on and I'm more turned on in my life now than I ever have been and that's the direction that I want to move as I get older that's always the direction I'm trying to go and not even just sexually turned on but that too but very much because it's something that we actually learn for me it's a process of learning to allow the turn on to build the capacity to be turned on to let things turn me on because there's so many things that turn me on in different ways and different levels of eroticism and sensuality and sexuality and all of that but I've repressed so much of that my whole life.
Lucy, I love what you're saying and I feel like this takes it back around to that whole conversation around Eros and sexuality and turn on and eroticism. And I absolutely relate. I can't imagine. I hope there are people out there who are absolutely I can't relate to that. At no point in my life was I ever, trained into shutting down my life force and my Eros and just my life force, I guess. It would be so. I hope that's the case. I assume that's not. I assume that we are the more on the side of the norm, and I just absolutely love what you were saying about that, and I can absolutely relate to. Oh wow, actually, even at times in your class, Christina, there were moments where I was feeling so much turn on, and then we'd have a break, and I had this moment where I was like, is it appropriate for me to feel this turned on right now? Is this okay? Should I shut it off? Because we're not it's not the appropriate container of this is when you can't do it versus can't do it. And that was just that moment was so potent for me to start to sit with when do I allow myself to be really excited and feel alive um, in my life and oh, it's not appropriate for me to feel alive in my life. I mean, another great example is when I'm feeling content and happy in my life and someone in my life does not feel that way.
Mm.
Is there a way that I can still hold that excitement from my own life and not feel like it's inappropriate for me to feel that way because someone else is not having the exact same experience I'm having?
So many good pieces in there. It makes me think about, like, as I've been doing more Eros events in New England, of all places, puritanical, it's fascinating. Like, some people are up for it and some people are coming up against their edges. Totally understand. With like, wait, no, my Eros is private and it's in a bedroom. And it's like it's compartmentalized. And so I am a big fan of, like, I want to be in Eros more often with people. Like, it has such a life force to it. Why are we keeping it sequestered? Now, obviously, there's a place to learn how to hold it when I might call like a clean way, that it's not leaking and it's not like looking for things unconsciously. Like that can get complex for sure. But if we keep going to the Eros gym and working out our muscles to learn how to hold it in a very clean and clear way, it doesn't need to be inappropriate, because I have all those same things too. And for instance, like for my birthday, I hired someone to come teach my friends and I lap dance. And it was so freaking fun. I've done this before. I brought in like lap dance teachers to work with my clients when I was out in California. And so I knew that like giving a lap dance is so powerful. Receiving a lap dance is incredibly powerful. And so I had like 20 people in the room and most of them were up for it. Some of it was like, they were a little freaked out, but it was so much fun. And inevitably, some people were like, you can do Eros with friends? And I was like, yes, you can do Eros with friends. Like a lap dance, it's not going anywhere. It doesn't mean like you want to sleep with them. Like if we can hold it in this pure way, like we can have access to more life force to use in other ways, and not, instead of just like always directing it down that channel of sexuality, which can just be so limiting in my, opinion. So I think, but we all are going to bump up against like our conditioning that says, is this appropriate? I've certainly had that feeling too. So thank you for sharing that, Danny. But I want all of us ideally to keep learning how to like hold it in this very pure, neutral way where it's life force that powers our lives. Like, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so good. So good. I love this
I'm
conversation so
feeling
much.
very turned on right now.
Oh, good. Excellent. Excellent. I wanted to circle back for a moment because I know I shared that I'm personally deciding not to alter my appearance in any way, but I obviously like want to make room for everyone gets to make that own decision for themselves. Like I know it's a very personal decision and so much goes into that. So I just want to make room, like there's room for your decisions and there's room for my decisions. But, I think we're all trying to figure out in this culture how to do aging in, feminine bodies and obviously the masculine bodies too. But I just want to like make room for all of that. And like, this is the stand that is right for me. And so I'm challenging myself in that way. It's not always easy, but that's my journey. But I want to make room for all journeys.
I love that. And I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, because it's
Mm.
like no judgment. Yeah. Well, Christina, so of course, Christina is going to be doing this cabaret, sexy cabaret in
Sexy Shack
Dominion.
Cabaret is what she calls it.
Sexy Shadow
Shadow
Cabaret. Thank you. In Dominion later this month. And so if you're in the membership, definitely you'll get an email about that, or maybe you already have. And if you're not in Dominion, you should join Dominion. And also, just to throw that out there. But
Of
also,
course.
Christina, would you let our listeners know where they can find you?
Sure, I would love to. I'd love to stay connected because I think we are all figuring this out together. I'm always very happy to say, listen, I don't have this all figured out, but I'm going to keep creating opportunities where we get to figure this out together. I think that's where we need to open source as sisterhoods, brotherhoods, all the hoods, like to figure out how we get free and how we change this world for the better. One way to find me is my website at christinamorassi.com. But I put together a free gift that I wanted to share with everyone because I was like, okay, I want to convey the power in bringing play to shadow work and also like the body into shadow work because I don't see that out there quite as much. And so I put together a free gift called Hot Shadow Play. And so it's a PDF that you can download, nice and simple, but it takes you through a process of like working with something like a part of yourself that maybe you don't love, and then finding a way to play with it, bring it into the body and start to look for the turn on around it. So we'll put the link into the show notes, but it is also bit.ly, bit.ly /hot shadow play. So you can find it that way as well, and it'll be in the show notes. So I would love if you want to start to see if this is something that speaks to you, like it speaks to me, then I would love to share that experience with you.
Thank you so much. That sounds amazing.
Can I just plug this a little bit harder? So,
Yes.
y'all, if you are watching this on May 28th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Christina is going to be teaching this 2-hour workshop in our community. The price for a monthly membership is absolutely worth just this one workshop. And I will tell you that this workshop is limited to only 12 participants. So if we have enough, so sign up, or if you're in the membership already, come early, because only the first 12 people are going to be allowed in or let in, just because we want to give enough space for this play, for this growth, and for the like sharing of witnessing that happens. And that happens just really, we want to keep it potent. And if is enough interest, this will be happening in other months. So show us that you are interested in this by signing up and coming.
Yeah. And we will, if you guys are like, we want this every month, then we will deliver. We will deliver on what you want. I love giving people what they want when they ask me for what they want. So nothing turns me on more than people
Oh,
asking me for what they want.
oh, Oh, can I tell you a fun story? I was leading a kink puja recently, and one of the stations was, we were gonna do begging as like one of the activities. And so someone spontaneously begged me for something. And I was like, I have been missing begging in my life. This is so hot when someone like just begs me for something. So I hear you, Lucy. So yeah, more begging, more asking for what we want. I love it. And maybe
Yes.
we'll deliver, be of service.
Yeah. Exactly. And dear listener, we want you to join Dominion and come and hang out with us and do cool shadow work with us so we can see you.
And we can play.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Well, thank you so, so much, Christina, for sharing
Mm,
your story with us and your
so
wisdom.
fun.
And thank you, Danny. Yes.
Thanks,
This was
Danny,
so
for
fun.
like putting this into motion and like calling me in. And it was so nice to
Oh,
get to meet you, Lucy. And I look forward to meeting everyone who comes to Sexy Shadow Cabaret at the end of the month.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Penetrate Radio. I have a free guided existential kink practice. If you are somebody who is new to this work, if you're new to EK, if you haven't read the book, if you're just not a reader, or if you need a refresher, you can get this. You can download it right now for free and use it to learn how to do EK and just follow along as a guided practice. It is meant for beginners. So I just want to let you know that that's available, and you can find it at the link in the description. Also, in the link in the description, you can find more information about our membership, Dominion, a field of radical approval. Dominion is less than the cost of a single manicure each month, and it's just a wonderful place to do this work in community. We have seen time and time again that being witnessed and witnessing others in this work is wildly helpful and validating. The last thing I want to mention is that a lot of our guests talk about the coach certification program Penetrate that they went through with myself and Layla. I want to let you know that we are going to be offering that same program again in 2027. And you can find a wait list in that same link if you're interested in getting information about that when it becomes available. And I think this goes without saying, but if you see anyone else offering a program called Penetrate that is also a coach certification program related to this kind of work, that is absolutely not the same program that Layla and I have taught, and that the people in this podcast are talking about when they talk about our coach certification program, Penetrate. So I just wanted to make that super clear. Layla and I share a lot of hard-won wisdom through that program. So if we're not the ones teaching it and offering it, then it is definitely not the same program. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Penetrate Radio, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao.